Hey guys, good morning. How's everybody doing? We'll give everybody a second to come on up here.
What's up, Greg? How's it
What's
going, man?
going on?
Good
Morning,
morning,
guys.
gents.
Ant, what's going on, man? We got Adam, we got Chris, we got everybody.
I know. I'm very excited. This is my first Twitter Spaces. I never had time during like the regular workday, but with it being like holiday vacation kind of week, and I saw the thing, I was like, "Oh, Spaces! I can do it."
Yeah, that's
Uh,
awesome, man.
I'll be honest. When I saw you guys like pop in there, like you and Adam, was like, yeah, this is
Well,
Yeah,
it's the same for me. I'm usually even Saturdays is usually a work day for me, but we shut down the business for this whole week to give everybody a break. So I'm really excited to take part and talk this big game that we've got coming up on Monday. It's I think probably the biggest game of the year. And
it
there's
is. I've
there's
seen a couple things. Someone on ESPN, obviously, it's not shocking ESPN is making this point because it's their broadcast. Um, but like statistically going through, making the point that it's potentially the biggest Monday night football game in history. Like they were going through
Oh
the number of
wow!
wow.
wins of the two teams, what's on the line, the performance of the two quarterbacks, the Super Bowl odds between the two teams, and that it was like the highest leverage game that they've ever broadcast on Monday Night Football. And it's not wrong. Like there is a case that this is the most impactful Monday Night Football game that they've ever broadcast, which is crazy.
Expectations are high.
It's insane. Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it so much with like the playoff seeding implications. Just from that standpoint alone, it's potentially huge. And then you think of I just keep thinking of like the atmosphere and the environment it's going to be there in Cincinnati. Like everyone knows they've beaten the Chiefs 3 times in a row. They just beat them there in Cincinnati a couple weeks ago. Now they have the chance to, I would say in their mind, like knock off the Bills because the Bills are looked at as being a team above the Bengals. Like, yeah, I would bill it like that, like crazy if I were ESPN, especially after what was the Monday night game last week? Wasn't it like the Packers and Rams, and it's like Baker Mayfield and just horrible just games that they've
Yeah.
gotten like recently. So yeah, I would build the hell out of that. It makes sense. It's huge.
Wait, a quick aside before we get into the actual fun of the Bills in the Bengals game. Almost nothing has brought me more joy than watching the life drip out of Al Michaels on Thursday Night Football with the slate of games. Like, I respect the fact
He hates it so
that
much.
they tried for like a Madden style that hey, if we're going to be new in the game here, we have to go spend a ton of money and get a familiar voice, and Fox pulled it off with John Madden and Pat Summerall, and it gave them gravitas and made them feel substantial right from the first day. And I won't lie, they had the right idea, but they whiffed so hard on pairing him with a great voice and a good football mind of a man who it's painfully obvious had not watched a professional football game in like
Mm.
5 years. Like Kirk Herbstreit's great in college. He doesn't know anything about the NFL, and watching the life drip out of Al Michaels between that and the horrendous slate of games they've gotten has just made me giggle every Thursday night. Yeah.
Yeah,
It,
it's a sad thing, especially when you're like we're just a year past Madden passing away, which was obviously a really sad day in sports. But yeah, yeah, you'd like to see that broadcast team like build up some momentum and be something good going forward because Amazon's going to be around for a
oh,
while.
well, and
So
I mean, the studio show they built with Fitzpatrick and Richard
That's
Sherman.
real good.
It like they've
yeah,
done
for
such.
sure.
I will. Tony Gonzalez is a little odd with the fit, but Whitworth and Sherman and Fitzpatrick are great.
Yeah,
And I'm going to draw Melissa
Carissa Thompson.
Carissa Thompson. Thank you.
She's a good host.
Oh yeah, they've done a really nice job. And then Al Michaels is Al Michaels, who's just as good as it gets. It is just so weird to see the combo on the announcing crew. Oh, all right. Anyways, back to our fun game. So,
Yeah, fortunately for Al, he does not get to call the Bills Bengals premiere
oh
matchup.
God. So Adam, I know you went through some interesting research this week on some of the different pieces for this matchup. Anything that sticks out to you that you think is That or anything that surprised you as you were poking around in some of the pieces you posted?
I don't necessarily think there was a ton surprising. The thing that was maybe interesting to me is that these defenses are, in a way, at least when you look at the DVOA and how they're designed to win, it seems like they play things a little bit different, right? So, for example, Cincinnati's strength against the pass is against number one receivers. In DVOA, they're ranked eighth against number ones. But then you look at how they do against number two receivers or other receivers. They're 31st against number twos, 23rd against other receivers, but then they're sixth and they're second against tight ends and running backs. So this, I think, is a really interesting matchup in the passing game because, we've had a lot of conversation this season about how the Bills are doing at depth at receiver, at wide receiver, and, Gabe Davis and Isaiah McKenzie. Looking at that, this appears to be the type of game that they're going to have to be very successful in order for the Bills to be successful. And for the Bills, it's the exact opposite, right? They are, as of today, 26th against number one receivers in DVOA, but they're very good across the rest of the targets. 12th against number twos, 11th against other. They're second against tight ends. Shout out to Matt Milano and Tremaine Edmonds. And 12th against running backs. So, teams really have been making their money against the Bills defense with their number one receivers. And, I know that Eric's working on a piece for Tre'Davious White. With him coming back and slowly getting healthier, maybe that's going to make a difference there in seeing the Bills defense perform better. So, it's a huge game, in my opinion, for Tre'Davious White and for Gabe Davis and Isaiah McKenzie and whoever else the Bills trot out with Stephon Diggs.
So, and with how Adam just laid that out, when you're diving into the film and looking at it, are you seeing that the Bills are kind of like one of those old NBA matchups where they'll be like, hey, all right, fine, your number one guy can get his, but nobody else is getting anything, and that won't be enough for you. And they're just willing to let some of those guys kind of eat underneath and be like, that's fine. If you feel like you can keep working your way down the field, we think you'll mess up eventually. Do you think that's intentional, or do you think that's just kind of how the scheme feeds?
I think from the whole design from the Bills' defensive perspective, I think is step one. It's based on like that odds perspective of like we don't think that you can continue to matriculate the ball down the field in that fashion and continue to stay efficient and beat us on a 9, 10, 11, 12 play drive. And I think you see that with the coverage pieces that we see, like with the two high shells and the idea of being like, no, cool, like we'll let you get an 8 or well not let, but like we'll allow an 8 or 9 yard run, but then we're confident that at some point our aggressive one gap penetrating nature, we're going to get a stop in the backfield and you're going to be put in second and 13 and we're going to get you off the field. I think a lot of it when you watch the tape, like you see based on their coverage structures and box alignments, they are comfortable in that live by the sword, die by the sword type of world and getting gashed every once in a while, but then willing to do the gashing, putting the offense in a negative situation and just playing the odds and playing to their strengths. I think when you see how often they play the coverages that they play and the design to keep everything in front, like they put the onus on the offense to like, if you're going to beat us, like you are going to have to beat us. You're going to earn it, but we're going to take a pound of flesh. And if you can come back from that, like good for you, but we don't think you can.
Yeah, it's interesting to see that approach because it's almost like we do the opposite on offense where we're willing to say, hey, we can continue to matriculate the ball down the field.
Mm-hmm.
We can convert those third downs. We try to skip them. We try to, convert on first and second down and just keep, getting those first downs earlier. But we're fine taking small chunks down the field. And we're betting that between whether it's a penalty, whether it's a, tackle for a loss, whether it's a sack, whether it's just one off schedule play, as soon as we get you off schedule, you won't be able to convert. And, rolling dice like that, we're going to give up some scores. But
Yes.
when they do that, it's obviously, I think 3 of the last 4 games, we've held teams to 13 points or less or whatever it is. Obviously, we're finding a way to make those convert and to make those stand. And I think that's what it's going to take on Monday is that, not that we're going to hold the Bengals to 13 points unless we're not. I don't anticipate that. But I think it's going to take that is that, hey, we can't give up the huge chunk plays because we know Chase can do that. We know Higgins can go over top. We know that's a possibility. We have to challenge them to say, hey, can we get you off schedule? Can we make Burrow uncomfortable just enough to make him force the ball here or there? And we just need, we've shown, they have shown that I made a point on Wednesday night's show that people talk about them being inconsistent, and they're not. They're actually very consistent. They consistently play one half of good football. They play one half of exceptional football very consistently, but they very consistently have an ugly half. And it's really weird how they flip back and forth. I don't know if it's adjustments. I don't know what it is, but it is odd that such a talented team has those consistent ugly halves of football.
It's interesting that you bring up consistency, Greg. That leads perfectly into not so deep dive, sort of shallow dive I did this week, but looking at Football Outsiders and their variance metric, where they measure the statistical variance of a team's weekly DVOA performance to show how consistent they are. The Bills are the 7th most consistent team in the league, whereas the Bengals are 23rd. It's sort of an interesting, I think on the surface, especially in the early part of the year, if you look at the Bengals, you might say this is an inconsistent team. They've gotten more consistent over as we've come down the stretch a bit. But an interesting note, other than Buffalo, the only playoff contenders that are in both the top 10 in overall DVOA and the top 10 in consistency are the Ravens and the Seahawks. Everybody else is middling to bad in terms of their consistency. And notable contenders with consistency issues, Dallas is 25th, San Francisco is 30th, and Kansas City, guys, is 27th in consistency.
Oof. The Chiefs are frauds.
That's what I just heard. It does.
You look at the way they played the Texans, right? And the Colts, too, right? This is
that Colts game.
Oh, God. But it does tell you who kind of so I've had a couple people make the case, and I don't necessarily think it's wrong, that if you're KC, is it inconceivable that, you kind of mess around during the regular season and that when you hosted 4 straight AFC championship games, it's kind of hard to really buckle in every single week when your range of outcomes is, hey, if we really dick around, it's going to be 11-6. If we really buckle in, it's going to be 13-4.
It's that Golden State Warriors mentality when they were like, we're just waiting to get to the playoffs.
That's probably a little dismissive. It's still, they might have dicked around enough that they might have lost themselves the home field advantage, and they may not host an AFC championship game for the first time in 4 years because of messing around the way that they did. The Bills still have to do their job. But I think
it's pretty reckless, though, in football. Yeah, when you're talking about a 17-game season, though, as opposed to 82 games, or it's pretty reckless to mess around even with one.
Yeah, I think some of that too is the whole when they lost, well, not lost, but they traded away Tyreek Hill, and so much of the narrative that was spoken about with them was, oh my God, this changes everything. This is such a downfield, vertical attacking team, downfield. And a lot of the explosives that they generated were, getting the ball into Tyreek in that underneath area and letting him take off, through the early part of the year and even through the midpoint to now. Mahomes' average depth of target is very similar to what it was last year. So the Chiefs, as the year went on last year, they were already starting to tweak their identity in terms of how they were attacking teams with the passing game to combat the too high looks that they were seeing. And what we all know at this point now of, defenses putting a cap on everything and putting a shell and yada, yada. But I think some of that too with that variance was them, and especially in this part of the year, trying to figure out okay, what do things look like regularly with Juju and MVS, and what can we get from McCole Hardman now? And okay, is Jerick McKinnon the back? Okay, is it Isaiah Pacheco? Okay, is it CEH? Okay, he's banged up. How many, they're using more 2 tight end and 3 tight end sets. And I think some of that is also maybe not even like complete messing around, but also maybe just tinkering and trying to figure out like,
For sure.
oh, sweet, this worked. And then being like, oh, that didn't. And that's when you see the bad variance pieces like kind of rear their ugly heads. In addition to some, like the Colts game we talked about, that they had a missed field goals and failed fake field goal attempts and missed executions on 4th down and wildness, but they definitely tinkered trying to figure out like who they were going to be. And it's crazy that they like were messing around and tinkering with things and they're still like 12-3.
Yeah,
Well, it's also like
I was talking to Eric about this the other day, and Anthony, to your point, the 12 and 13 personnel, they're in that 37% of their snaps this season versus 25%. And I think they look at the wide receiver core. They're still built a lot on getting a lot of yards after the catch. I mean, they've been one of the best teams in the league at that for many years now, and that hasn't changed, even though Hill isn't there. And a lot of it is the schematics, but I thought Reed, going to these heavy packages using, they have more than one talented tight end on that roster. And it's also afforded them the ability to have Mahomes passing against stack boxes where, you're a little bit more open on the outsides. It's making room for, for those receivers. And it's obviously working for them.
Yeah. And you also think too, like if they're going, if they're sitting there in 12 personnel or 13 personnel, one of those tight ends is Travis Kelce, who is also a matchup problem in and of himself. So think if they're going 13 personnel, right? So they got 3 tight ends on the field. One of those tight ends is Travis Kelce, who could be lined up in line. He could be lined up, hipped off, the line of scrimmage, or he could be lined up as your X receiver on the outside. But because you've got the presence of those other 2 tight ends, you're probably matching in base personnel if you're the defense going against the Chiefs because you want to put those 3 linebackers in there. If not, the Chiefs have shown the ability to run the ball on you, especially with the downhill nature of Isaiah Pacheco combined with their offensive line. So, oh, cool, you're going to stay in nickel? Well, we'll actually run the ball this year, and we're not just going to keep pressing the RPO button. Or if you match with base, okay, our tight ends are athletic enough to beat that. Also, one of them is Travis Kelce. Like, it just presents that natural matchup problem for a defense. And then the person calling the shots is Andy Reid, and the trigger man is Patrick Mahomes, and problems ensue.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, it's not the exact same, but I mean, it's not terribly different than what Shanahan does with Juszczyk and Kittle,
Oh,
where
yeah,
like,
beautiful.
hey, you want to stay small, these guys can punch you in the mouth. Oh, you want to go big, these guys can run past you. And it's
Yeah.
just no matter what, it's a genuine pick your poison where you don't have a great answer in either direction. And not that Noah Gray and some of the other pieces that they have are on that tier, but Kelce has so much gravity. When he goes out, that it still works, and you have an offensive mind like Andy Reid. It allows for those things. Real quick before we go into our next topic, we got a lot of people jumping in here. So shout out to we got Joe Marino, we got LaShawn, we got Michael, all kinds of people. Mexico
yeah, what's
Marty,
up,
what's going
Joe?
on, guys? Anybody who has questions, if you want to come up and ask something or chime in, just raise your hand or let us know or request it. If you don't want to come up and ask, you can actually use the reply down at the bottom right and ask a question. So if you can do that, we can answer questions that way. If you don't want to come up and talk, but you have something you'd be curious to get our thoughts on, so you can chime in that way as well. I want to throw one out there for this Bengals team, in that I think almost more so. We talk about the top end talent. It's easy to look at Miami and you have those top receivers, and you even go to Kansas City. It's kind of a Kelsey and then a whole bunch of other pieces here and there. You even go out to like the Chargers and you have the top 2 receivers and a dynamic back. The Bengals, it really is incredible the depth that they go to, where Jamar Chase and T. Higgins can hang with anybody as a top 2, but then
Mm.
Tyler Boyd's also probably the best third receiver that you have. And then you add in, oh yeah, Hayden Hurst is actually an above average tight end. And then you have Joe Mixon, and even if Joe Mixon comes off the field, you have Samaje Perine. Like it's crazy the depth of skill position talent they built around Burrow. And then obviously we've had all the debates going around about where Burrow should be and if he's exactly on even footing with Mahomes and Allen or a notch below or whoever wants to argue it. His, pocket presence and accuracy combined with that embarrassment of riches of weapons is a really dangerous combination. Ant, you did some work here kind of prepping for this with the matchup. How do you approach that kind of offensive skill group in a defense where, hey, we're kind of built on, like you talked about before, allowing things underneath, rallying and tackling, bet they can't move the ball down the field. How do we do that when they literally have 5 genuine weapons on every play?
It's legitimately terrifying. Like you start with that, and then I also think you start with the T Higgins piece, just going from everything. Like, so T Higgins, there's 187 players that have at least 30 targets this year. That's wide receivers, tight ends, and running backs. He's ninth in EPA per target. He's seventh in total EPA. He's 20th in yards per route run. He's 13th in yards per target. He's 11th in total receiving yards. He's tied for 11th in receiving touchdowns, and he's 23rd in receptions. And he's the wide receiver too, because you have a generational number one in Jamar Chase. And that for me starts everything of how you start to scheme and attack the Bengals, because I don't mean this to be disrespectful to Trey or Dane Jackson or Elam or whoever is playing corner for the Bills, or honestly anybody. Whoever plays the Bengals every week, you're most likely outmatched on the outside. Like, whoever your corners are, the odds are that you have two guys that are good enough to go, blow for blow with Jamar Chase and T Higgins. And then, Greg, your point, we're not even taking into account like the big slot receiver in Tyler Boyd, who can also function in the blocking game and crack down on edges and linebackers. They have such versatility and such matchup problem causing skill sets that it's tough to be on an island with them. It's tough to be in one-on-ones. I think it lends to the conversation of how much zone versus man do you play. And I think because you can't necessarily beat their wide receivers one-on-one, I think you have to cause problems for Burrow and make him inefficient in finding Chase and in finding Boyd. And I watched a bunch of Bengals tape in prep for this week, and one of the games was that Buccaneers game, which, despite the fact that the Buccaneers offense threw up all over itself, the Bucs defense had a good game plan with their simulated pressures, with their creepers. They were disguising coverages on the back end. They were running cover two, where one half of the field was covered by a safety, the other was covered by a corner, and they were bringing them from different looks. You have to find ways to change the pre to post snap picture on Joe Burrow and either get him to throw to somewhere that he thinks it's open and it's not, or get him to hold that ball for an extra half or 3/4 of a second and then hope your pressure gets to him up front. Because if you're just sitting back and being like, well, we're just going to play coverage against Jamar Chase and T Higgins and Tyler Boyd, you're like, the odds of you winning with that formula, I don't think are high for like any team in the NFL.
Yeah, it is odd how much I didn't anticipate going through and doing the work and prepping the pieces and getting ready for the matchup and coming away with, I guess we just have to beat Joe Burrow. Like
Yeah. And that's
really,
hard because, like you said, like he's in that top tier of quarterback. Like, he may not have the raw athleticism and the off script capability, but he's got enough escapability. And then with his anticipation and accuracy, like, he's a top level QB. And so your hope is to shut down or make inefficient a top level QB, which
oh
is
yeah.
hard.
Well, and it's
As a QB who's had a mostly healthy offensive line throughout the
that's
year.
a big one. That Hakeem
But
Adeniji, like that guy he was a target in the playoffs last year.
Mm-hmm.
Like he was the guy you went after at guard, and now they're not only going to not have him at guard, but they're putting him out at tackle when he's barely 300 pounds. And
yeah,
we need Gregory Rousseau to be able to whip him on a handful of reps and to consistently, like, it's one of those games where I don't need Gregory Rousseau to have a 3.5 sack, some, you know, historic performance. I
Mm-hmm.
do need him to consistently pester Burrow and to
Right.
get enough win.
Make him rush those
Well, and
throws.
specifically
Yeah.
get some of those wins early to be
Mm-hmm.
in Burrow's head and to realize that, oh crap, I got to watch for that. I got to watch for that. Or, hey, now all of a sudden Hayden Hurst isn't a problem because they have to keep him in. And now there's one less guy out there that we have to worry about. That's one more, player that we get to help
Yes.
over on Higgins or Chase or Boyd or whoever it might be, or, one more guy. And also, like, I think they can be a little more aggressive. It's hard because Burrow isn't all the way down at like the Jared Goff end of the spectrum where like he's never gonna run, but he's also not Mahomes or Herbert. Like he's in the middle there. So they can be more
Mm-hmm.
aggressive with Milano using him as a weapon, and he doesn't have to do. He played that kind of mugged up A gap, muddled rush spy guy against Fields a ton. We're not going to need to do that. Like he's going to be able to be either more straight up aggressive or drop out and be able to play around, flying to different guys who need help. I'm curious how they use that in a week where, I'm sure I'm going to regret this, but I don't think Burrow's going to run for multiple third down conversions. He's probably going to
He's gonna
But
run. He's gonna run for like 90 yards
yeah,
now.
of course he is.
he
But
he runs about 5 times
yeah,
each
he's going
game.
to get us once or twice just because teams bank on that. Because teams are
Yeah.
going to say, "Hey, he's not going to be that guy," so he does cash in on it once or twice. But it's not a constant threat. I'm curious how they make that out and to be able to go through and do that. And I don't know. We'll see where it goes.
It's a huge game for the young pass rushers.
I was just going to
Yeah.
say,
no question.
what do you guys think on the interior? Last week, obviously, it's hard because the Bears' interior was, pretty rough. So, of course, Ed looked dominant and we had a dominant performance. Now going against Karras and some more talented, established guys, do we think we can see that interior pressure when the interior is the best part of the Bengals line?
Ooh, I think so individually. I don't necessarily think it's from a straight up one-on-one win perspective, although I do think you can get that. I think it comes from the pressure packages you show. The Bengals offensive line as a whole on the year has gotten better as the year has progressed. Burrow has been sacked 39 times this year. But from week 9 and on, when they've been on this 7-game win streak, he's only been sacked 10 times. So he's been sacked 10 times in the last 7 games that they've gone through. The Bengals offensive line has started to put some things together, but when they've gotten beat, it's been because of teams scheming them up and gaming them up, and you create a one-on-one inside with a good angle and you match up in that way. I think the Bills can win on the interior, but I think it'll come more from simulated pressures, or you're running, stunts on the inside and playing games and kind of confusing them in that way and making them communicate, especially if you're showing pressure looks and then you have to make them, keep in, Greg, like you mentioned, like a running back or a tight end, because maybe you want to help Adeniji at right tackle. And all of a sudden you're kind of playing their protection rules against them and forcing them to waste potential receivers in the route distribution by keeping them in the backfield and or using their rules against them up front. I think you'll see a lot of, mugged up looks and not necessarily bringing it and just going either showing pressure and dropping it or running a simulated and still only rushing 4 and dropping a non-traditional rusher. I think you can beat them by forcing them into poor angles and playing in situations they don't want to.
100%. I think when you have that strength up the middle, a big key in beating that is them not knowing which 4 guys are coming and coming from different angles, coming from different combinations. Not necessarily, I really loved when we had Vaughn and we could do that crazy, like 1 on one side, 3 on the other overload.
Yeah.
I don't know that we can completely go to that with Rousseau, but mix it in, throw it in here or there to really make them choose. And even do that, but then bring Milano on the Rousseau side and drop out, for a play, drop out Shaq Lawson into a hook zone or into a flat and let him go out there. I don't like doing tons of that, but on the occasion that we can, just to take away the flair, to take away the hot read while you bring pressure the other way, that's the split second you need to get a tip ball, to get a turnover, to get Burrow to second guess and eat it and take the sack. I think that's what it's going to take, because I do think their interior is pretty strong. I don't think we can depend on just getting a dominant performance from the defensive tackles. I think they'll get their wins here or there, but it's not going to be the constant presence like they were against Chicago's, horrible interior.
Yeah,
But
less than ideal.
yeah, less than ideal.
And especially when you put that with like how comfortable Burrow has gotten as the season has progressed, being like, oh, okay, like snap 1-2, and I'll check it down. Like
Yeah.
he's so comfortable just being like, okay, cool, I'll live in 2nd and 6 and 2nd and 5. I'll dump it down to Mixon or Pirine. And honestly, then that's where it plays into as well. The Bills have been such a poor tackling team the last like month. So okay, like you go one-on-one against Mixon or Pirine, like maybe that advantage favors Mixon or Pirine, and they can turn a 40-yard completion into a 12-yard gain like we've seen these last couple of weeks. And then all of a sudden Burrow gets into that rhythm with them, let alone his ability to find Chase underneath and Boyd underneath and so on and so forth. Yeah, you have to be able to present different looks and confuse him and get him off that rhythm and that comfortability pattern.
Well, and I
So talking to
was going to say, they use it really well when they get those like smaller chunks on first down. When they get to 2nd and 2, that's when they're like, well, fine, screw it. We'll just take a shot to Higgins or Chase and see who can do it. And then all of a sudden you go back, and now they're like, all right, it didn't work, but we'll still convert on 3rd and 2 because we're fine. So it really sets them up well. Where are you going, Chris?
I was just going to say, talking about patience and taking those checkdowns, and watching the Bears game last week, we saw Josh throw some really ill-advised passes, and it just felt like he was pressing. And I've been thinking about it all week, and I wanted to see what you guys thought about this, I guess little theory that I came up with, that, I wonder if when we have these sort of run-heavy game scripts, if he feels like every throw is that much more important because he's not going to get as many chances. And he's a gunslinger. He wants to push the ball down the field. And I just, I wonder, I'm trying to rationalize why he's throwing into double coverage to Isaiah McKenzie down the field, or just like across the field into double coverage, that like a jump ball that just has very little. I mean, it's not even a 50-50 ball because there's already guys there. Does it seem like that, like the run heavy script could be something that, is affecting his decision making?
So, I mean, I think the hard part that we all get caught up in, and I think all of us, it's fair, it becomes results based. And when you're in those spots, we get frustrated and critical. I think we underestimate how often he pulls those off. And that, the same thing that we all joke about, the no, go, 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 the crazy plays, the end of half against the Patriots where he scores with 0 seconds left. That's completely results based. That wasn't good football. That wasn't smart decision making, but he's amazing. So it worked. So he ran scrambling out of bounds, wasting all the time in the half as he's jumping out of bounds, spinning back, throwing against his body back across the field, and finds a guy in the back of the end zone for a touchdown. It's awesome. He did the same thing to Gabe Davis. When you freeze frame it, there are 3 defenders in front of him, but he's jumping out of bounds and kind of sees it, and Gabe Davis leans back in and comes out from behind the 3 defenders, and he hits him across his body back in the back of the end zone. That's not good, smart football. It's just amazing playmaking. So some of those times, it's really accepting the package that Josh Allen is. Like, he's always going to try. It's like when you're out golfing with your friends. Like, you have some of your friends that are good and know to take their medicine and just go back out into the fairway and then get back and, hey, they only got a bogey on the hole. But if I can see the flag, I'm going to try to shoot it through 6 of the trees because I can see the flag. And, most of the time we're all going to laugh because it's going to hit the tree and bounce back and hit me in the middle of the chest. But at the end of the round, we're going to go, man, do you remember that one that I snaked through all the trees? Because I took, it's Josh is always going to be that guy. He's always going to go for the hero shot. He's always going to go for those things. And now, would I love for him to comfortably take more checkdowns? Yes, of course. Are they drilling that into his head? Yes, of course. But as soon as the play breaks down and he starts going, his brain goes to that mode. And what we have in our favor is it works more often than it doesn't. And that I just think we're always going to have to kind of accept that. I, I think that he can slightly tweak it and get a little better with it, but I don't think he's ever going to just become the completely patient death by a thousand paper cuts guy. I just don't think it's ever going to be in him.
I think that's super well said. Like that is, I hate comps for players, but the Brett Favre to Josh Allen comp is so spot on. Like literally the guy who you would be like, oh my God, what an amazing throw by Favre. And then literally on the next drive, you'd be like, what a stupid throw by Favre.
And real quick,
and that's,
and I think a lot of younger people, I think only remember the tail end of Favre where it really was too much gunslinger when he didn't have the same bazooka. And I think some people forget that in the 90s and early 2000s, you're talking about a 3 consecutive season MVP, multiple Super Bowl champ, and the best quarterback in the NFL at times. And then later, he relied on that, oh, I'm still that same guy when he probably shouldn't have. And I got to warn people, in 10, 12 years, we might be dealing with that, and we'll deal with that when the time comes. But right now, it's okay. Like a comparison,
enjoy
to
it while it
yeah, a
lasts.
comparison to Brett Favre is an enormous compliment, and that it doesn't mean no, he's not perfect. He's not the he's not the human computer Peyton Manning was. He's not the ice cold disciplinarian that Brady was. But Brett Favre was amazing and beat the best guys in the NFL to win championships and to win MVPs. It's a huge compliment.
Yeah, he was making throws that literally only Brett Favre could make. Now, just Allen makes those throws, and it just so happens that like Patrick Mahomes can also make them, and Herbert can make them. So it's less like one of one. But yeah, it's that nature. Like Allen makes plays that a lot of times only Josh Allen can make. And Greg, you're so spot on because I feel like the the chaos and the ridiculous plays that he makes that result in interceptions where everybody's like, that's so stupid. Like, why would he make that decision? That's the same decision he made in a previous game that resulted in a touchdown, and everybody's like applauding, like, oh my God, he's a unicorn. This is amazing. But sometimes like the football gods giveth and the football gods taketh away. And that it's the same player, and that's who he is. Like he'll make a stupid throw all the way across his body that'll get picked, and you're like, that was dumb. And then he'll do the same throw later in the game or the next game, and it'll result in a 25-yard completion that breaks the back of the defense, and they all just look at each other like, dude, what the hell are we supposed to do? It's the yin and the yang of it, live by the sword, die by the sword, whatever you want to label it. Like, yeah, that's who he is.
I don't know if you remember seeing the clip in the Texans game with KC. Do you remember the play Mahomes is rolling out to the right and makes a horrendous throw all the way back across the field to the left? And like I'm sitting there, I rewatched the clip 20 times and figuring on the 20th one of the Texans would just grab it and go for a pick six. And somehow it keeps going to Kelsey. Like he's not the only one that does these things. Mahomes gets away with it too. Mahomes also thinks he can fit it in there every single time, and that when we, hey, everybody goes crazy that that Allen has these interceptions. Well, if you look at the league leader in interceptions, Burrow has 12, and Mahomes has 11, and Allen has 13, and Herbert has 10. Like it's just kind of the way this works that it's not going to. There are very few guys who now operate the way Aaron Rodgers does, where Rodgers got to the point where he wouldn't try it as much anymore because I almost think he kind of cared about his touchdown interception ratio too much, and that I'm not even kidding. Like I think he might have helped.
No, I think that's very real.
He might have helped his team more if he was willing to take a few more chances and to use your God-given abilities and not eat it so he would rather take a sack and lose yardage than throw it away and hurt his completion percentage. Like that kind of stuff is selfish. Like that's not what helps a team in those instances. So I'll take Josh's package. Like, of course, would I love to tweak all the small knobs to just the perfect end of each spectrum and be like, oh, I want all the good things where he scrambles and hurdles guy, but he never fumbles. I want all the crazy howitzer throws, but he only wins the contested double coverage catches, and that he only throws across the body for touchdowns and not throws across the body for interceptions. Like, yeah, I want all those things too. It just life doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And it just you mentioned the phrase earlier, the whole like results based thing, and I think that's what people get focused on so much. Like it's ironically, and I don't mean this to be like a Bills pun, like they get focused so much on the result and not about the process. And so you just get focused on the result of like, oh, it's an interception, it's just an interception, or it's just a touchdown, it's just a touchdown. And instead of thinking what led to the touchdown.
Yeah. Hey, Whittle, what's going on, man?
We got Whittle's in here.
A lot of those things are the same thing.
Yeah, for sure.
It's interesting.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Cover One All Stars. Shout out to Bills Mafia, everybody in here. It's Bills Mafia. Okay, so I've been doing a little dive on the numbers, and I apologize if my service gets a little choppy.
No, you're clean right now. We can hear you clear.
I appreciate it. Okay, cool. I've been doing a little dive on the numbers, and when it comes to situational football, offensively, defensively, running the football, yards per carry, yards per game, on both sides of the ball. Like we are either better or like right there with Cincinnati. Even when it comes to situational football, third and down percentage, offensive. The offense getting the first down or the defense stopping the other team from getting the first down. Like we're better than them. If you want to extrapolate over the last 3 games, we're better than they are. Why do I feel so worried about this game? And piggyback off of that question is somebody make me feel better about Spencer Brown playing right tackle in this game and Allen's like 13 fumbles.
So I'll start with the last one. There isn't a great answer. There are going to be some challenges because I actually think there's a chance we face Trey Hendrickson and Sam Hubbard. I don't know for sure if they're going to go with Hubbard, but if right now Hendrickson is playing but is definitely limited and has some challenges, he's gutting through it. Hubbard, if he plays, would be the same. But we're also about to play probably the best one tech that we've played all season. We've played some dominant penetrating game wreckers. We played Aaron Donald, we played Cam Hayward, we played Jeffrey Simmons, we played as good as it gets from that standpoint. DJ Reader might be one of the only guys who's playing one tech better than Daquan Jones this season. Like Daquan Jones has been ridiculous, and DJ Reader has been even better than that. So from a pass rush standpoint, Josh is going to have to be on his toes and ready because they have some guys who can do just what our plan is, get home with 3 or 4 and drop everybody else into coverage. Lou Amarulo will dial up blitzes here and there, but they basically do what we do. They say, hey, we got Jesse Bates back there. We got 2 young, athletic, movable linebackers. There's a ton of similarities in these defenses that it's going to be on Josh to make a guy miss and still find a guy. Anthony, what do you think about Whittle's question on, we know the names Joe Mixon, and I think people think of their run game being stronger than ours. Do you think where we are in this phases of the season, do you think it's probably closer than people realize in run game capabilities?
Yeah, I think the Bills have definitely gotten better with their run game as the season has progressed. Ironically, very similar in the way they did last year, and starting to really rely on. I think they've whittled down, no pun intended, to Whittle's name over there. I think they've whittled down their run packages to knowing, okay, like this is what we do well. This is what we can hang our hat on. And you're seeing, the dart plays, whether you're wrapping the tackle all the way around the outside or you're bringing them on the inside, a little more mid-zone, crack toss, all those pieces. I think the Bills' run game has gotten better. The thing that I think separates the Bengals' run game from the Bills is their diversity in the runs that they get to from shotgun. As the season has progressed, so weeks 1 through 5, especially when the Bengals were struggling, they were in shotgun about 69% of the time, which was 13th. But from week 6 and on to right now, they've been in shotgun 80% of the time. They will run out of shotgun. They'll obviously pass out of it. But their run game out of shotgun is so diverse. They'll run inside zone. They'll run outside zone. They'll run pin and pull, crack toss. They'll run duo. They'll run draws. They'll run wham, and they'll run trap, similar to what the Colts did last year, taking advantage of Ed Oliver getting upfield in a quick way. So I think overall, I think the Bills' run game has gotten better and is starting to get on par with some of the better teams. But I do think what separates Cincinnati's run game is their diversity in terms of what they can get to and how effective they are in it when they run from shotgun.
So over the last 4 weeks, Buffalo actually has the number 3 rushing offense in terms of DVOA. Cincinnati's at 13 over the last 4 weeks. So something to keep in mind to Whittle's point there.
I want to give a shout out to Sal Capaccio, did a nice bit of filtering there. I think a lot of people automatically dismiss that as, well, yeah, of course we have Josh Allen. And I think he showed that, one, the Bills are now the number 1 team in the league in yards per carry, which is shocking. But if you remove Josh Allen, the running backs are 5th in the league in yards per carry, which was shocking. And I know that right now there's quite a few metrics that James Cook doesn't quite qualify for, but in a
yeah, Adam had an interesting pull on this.
Adam, do you have something
on James
Cook?
Cook?
Yeah, I do actually. I went and looked this up just yesterday, and the stat is that he's not technically qualified to rank with the people who've had more volume this season because he's under 100 carries. But if he did have over 100 carries, his rushing DVOA, which is the value per rush, would put him number 1 in the NFL. And Devin Singletary is having a great season in that regard, too. So I don't have it exactly in front of me, but he was somewhere around 15, 14, 15. And then when you look at the Bills' success rate rushing the ball overall, they're ranked 7th there. 43% of their rushes result in a positive EPA. And Cincinnati is actually ranked 13th, in success rate. So, the Bills' running game is going to have to be a part of what makes them successful in this game. And overall, when you look at efficiency metrics like DVOA, EPA per play, the Bills, on the season are a little bit better than the Bengals. So you should feel pretty good about the Bills' chances in this game. But when you look at how they match up and the simulations of how these games would play out, it's going to be close. And maybe the Bills would win 6 out of 10. The Bengals would win 4 out of 10. If they played 10 times. I think the reason...
Whittle, we just gave you so much ammunition to go back to Lamont Jordan, my man.
Right? I mean, it's the difference between, possibly having the bye and not having the bye in the first round. And that makes a huge difference what your odds are of winning the Super Bowl.
It has them
for ball, right? So...
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I know
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't mean to talk over you there, but Whittle has been on the Lamont Jordan beat since that Spaces we did with him, and now we just gave you like 10 data points to take back to him.
Love it. I know time-wise, I only got a couple more minutes here before I got to wrap up. So if anybody else has any questions, you guys can again, you can reply. You can raise your hand now. Otherwise, I'll kind of go back around here. So maybe each of us here. I know Chris, you had put in a projection for the show on Wednesday. What's your prediction for what we see here Monday night and how you think it's going to turn out?
Yeah, so I mean, I think this is going to be a high-scoring game. We didn't get into DVOA and during the matchup show. We had a great conversation with the Goodberry brothers, and so that leaves us, some stuff to talk about now, obviously. But the 4 major units, Buffalo's offense and defense and Cincinnati's offense and defense. Everything is in the top 5 overall except for Cincinnati's defense, which has been middling. And over the last 4 weeks, they are the number 19 pass defense, number 17 overall defense in terms of DVOA. So that's certainly a key matchup to watch for because we think, Cincinnati's going to be able to move the ball. The Bills do need to make some stops, keep them out of the end zone, but they also need to come with their A game on offense to match up with that honestly winnable matchup in order to keep pace with the Bengals. So, like I said, I think it's going to be high scoring. In a close matchup like this, I'm going to give the edge to the team that's better in overall DVOA, better defensively, and more consistent. Like I was saying earlier, the Bills are the 7th most consistent team in the league. The Bengals are 23rd. I'm going to go Bills 31, Bengals 27. So that's taking the over and the Bills to cover.
I like it. Anthony, how about you? What are you expecting on Monday night?
Ooh, well, I'm not going to give a score prediction because I'm too superstitious. But from a matchup perspective, I'm very interested to see what Bengals defensive coordinator Lou Anarumo tries to take away from the Bills offense. He's very good. The Bengals defense, and Chris just spoke to a bunch of it, like overall, like they're kind of middling and they're up and down, but they're a very good matchup specific defense in terms of like adapting who they are for that week to take away a specific thing. And they may get beat somewhere else, but they're like, okay, cool. Like your thing is throwing like right hand haymakers. We're going to take that away. You might get us with some right hand jabs and left punches all day, but we're taking away the thing you do best, or that's what we're designed to do. I'm very interested to see what he does in that regard and what he tries to take away. It's kind of like Belichickian in terms of what Belichick used to do or still tries to do, although that's kind of fallen apart. Whatever, conversation for another time. And then on the flip side of the ball,
I'm there for that conversation. Yeah, we can
I would
talk
say,
about Belichick's decline all you want.
I'm down. And then on the other side of the ball, seeing how you, despite the fact that it's a passing league, how you fit the run determines what you're able to do on the back end. And in a game where you're going to need numbers and coverage because of how good Higgins and Chase and Boyd and even Trent Irwin has been recently, let alone Hayden Hurst and the whole like regular cast, having more numbers and coverage would be very helpful in this matchup. But you can't have those 2 high shells and those 2 high looks if you can't fit the run with your 6-man and your 7-man boxes. So that's my biggest thing on that side of the ball. How are they able to fit the run with their light boxes and 7-man boxes? And does the tackling improve? Like if you're coming from depth, they've been struggling against, tackling from depth in general these last several weeks. And now you got to deal with 220 plus pound running backs who also run pretty fast. Like I'm looking for those individual siloed pieces in the bigger scheme of things.
So I know Widow's got one more question, and I'm 99% sure that my answer on what we see Monday night will answer his question. So let me see if I guessed right.
All right, thank you. I hope I'm in a better area now. Anthony jumped on one of the issues that I had going into this game. Like the tackling has been horrendous this year. Somebody pointed it out. Matt Milano's having the worst tackling year of his career so far, and for as good as he's been, he misses tackles in huge spots.
Sorry, I think you meant to say Tremaine Edmonds.
No. Actually, Tremaine Edmonds has been the best tackler on the team this year.
Whoa.
Shocking.
Whittle.
Yes.
Whittle. What?
Yeah.
I
know. I don't. Much to the chagrin of the Tremaine haters that are in Bills Mafia. Sorry, guys, we're gonna re-sign him, and he's gonna get paid. You just don't find 6'5", 240, 4.5 speed with long arms.
Yeah, sideline to sideline.
So sideline to sideline, like it's 4.5 and it's legit.
They better find a way, man.
So George,
absolutely,
we need Edmonds here.
Widow, I think
absolutely. But my question is,
yeah, go ahead.
All right, my question is coverage. Like I know we're gonna play a ton of zone. I think we'll throw man in from time to time. I feel like Dane Jackson is going to get the nod over Kaya Elam, and it's going to be strictly because of Dane is a better tackler than Dane's better at tackling. He's a better run defender from the corner position. Do you guys agree? And I think we win this game if we attack their tackles. Our defensive ends have to win, And they're not a team that gets penalized a lot. Like I looked it up, they're one of the best in the league. I believe they're top 10 in least amount of penalty yards. We have to draw holding calls in order to stay ahead and down in distance. Like how good does Boogie Basham look as far from a health perspective, from a health perspective, and like you guys are closer to this team than I am. What do you guys think against their tackles? How do our defensive ends, minus Bob Miller, fare? Like, how do they look? Like, is this a winnable matchup for us on the right and the left ends of the line?
No, it's two good questions. I think that both of them are going to be really impactful in the matchup. We talked earlier in this discussion about how strong the interior of Cincinnati's line is. The opposite of that is their tackles struggle a little bit. That they're not always consistent in the way that they can protect and what they do. They depend on Burrow's ability. Again, he's not a scrambler. He's not an athlete, but he has great pocket presence. He manipulates the pocket well. He steps up really well. He has kind of that annoying Brady sixth sense of knowing exactly when to step up and what to do. They depend on that. And now you're removing Lyle Collins and putting in Hakeem Adeniji, who was already a liability at guard. Now you're putting him out at tackle. One of the things that benefits us, I think, is that they are both Jonah Williams and Adeniji are susceptible to power rushes. And when you have, we don't have Von Miller. We don't have that Ferrari going around the edge anymore. But Gregory Rousseau and Shaq Lawson and AJ FNS and Boogie Basham can power rush and be able to pin that back. And I think with a player like Burrow, all of a sudden a compressing pocket where we're still going to get some movement from Ed Oliver, Jordan Phillips, Daquan Jones, and Tim Settle. You combine that with tackles that are getting pushed back into your lap. Now all of a sudden it becomes a bigger problem for them. And if we can get some of those wins early, I think it's going to be able to impact that to really have a factor on the game. Your other question is where I think the biggest deciding factor is going to be. Both Adam and Chris and Anthony brought up good points about, there's a lot of balance. There's a lot of equality in this matchup. One of the pieces is Cincinnati's defense is not necessarily on par with the rest of the units here. Buffalo's offense is going to be able to move the ball and score on Cincinnati. The difference is going to be, can Buffalo's defense tackle the talent of Cincinnati's skill positions? I promise you, I guarantee it, we're going to be frustrated a couple times. Jamar Chase is not brought down by I think it was Joe Goodberry on our show Wednesday night. He said it's less than 10% of the time that the first defender brings down Jamar Chase. He's just an elite, crazy athlete. Then you have those two, big, fast running backs, Joe Mixon and Samaje Perine. Those guys are going to break some tackles. They're going to get out into space. What we need is for them to be turning 7 and 8 yard gains into 15 and 20 yard gains. We'll live. We will survive that. We can't let them take those and turn them into 60-yard touchdowns. We can't let them be backbreaking, touchdowns on a 3rd and 15 when we were trying to rally to tackle and end a drive and get the ball back. And now all of a sudden, not only do we not end the drive, that they flip it and convert that over to a score. I know it's going to happen once or twice. We can't let it happen repeatedly. If it does happen repeatedly, that is a recipe for how Cincinnati could win this game.
Yeah, it's one of those games where a win for the Buffalo defense is holding Cincinnati to field goals on one, two, maybe 3 possessions like that.
Yes.
It could be the difference there
7
because they're going to move the
3s.
ball. Yep.
So we do have to wrap. I know we got a couple other people who had chimed in here. I apologize. I do have to get things wrapped up. I'm already a little bit over what I had committed to, but this was awesome. It was a ton of fun. Really appreciate everybody jumping on. This has been a lot of fun. We'll see, depending on how the weekend goes, if there's some exciting things, maybe Sunday night, we'll be able to get together. If not, make sure you guys are watching. We've been doing some of our Cover One Football Weekly. If we have some recap stuff on Sunday night, if they're not able to go, maybe we'll jump on and do a Spaces there later to see how the rest of the game outcomes turned out for the Bills, if they helped or hurt those things. If we head into Monday night, make sure you're watching. We'll have the Air Raid Hour preview show. We'll have some stuff from the guys over at the Roundup. and then Aaron and Chris and I will be on for the post game show afterwards. You'll be able to hang out with Aaron and I and get all the takes from the show. So appreciate everybody. You guys were awesome. We'll talk soon, and go Bills.